God bless. This is NFL Moneyball, brought to you by NFL Extended Strategic Principles, found on the web at nfl-esp.com. I am your host, Mark Anthony DeBello. For more information on me and this program, you may go to my website, markanthonydebello.com, and click on the Sports tab. Today is Monday, December the 7th. It's 9:01 Pacific Standard Time, coming to you here from Nevada. This is going to be a half-an-hour program. I already have to apologize for last week. Our Week 12 edition, for some reason, did not download, so I'm going to have to give you an honest assessment of what we at NFL ESP had done with regards to our 3 Ps, which is prophecy, prediction, and production, and how we cover the games and review the games and analyze the games from the perspective, the unique, godly perspective of NFL ESP. And then again, I'll break down this week's program into 3 segments, covering the games from the uniquely accurate analytical perspective of NFL Extended Strategic Principles, then how that data, would relate to those who have an interest in Nevada, and they can sort of do the math, as everybody says, to see where the best value is, and how to be right in what you would consider a prediction. And then lastly, how it applies to those who participate in fantasy football, as again, our information is very unique, and as I like to say, I'm mining the data from out here in Las Vegas. It doesn't mean, again, that the integrity of the game needs to be compromised when it comes to what NFL ESP is designed to do, which is offer coaches the best statistical information, the best probabilities to make the most productive basic strategy decisions, and again cover those from 4 aspects, which is the spiritual, motivational, X's and O's, which is typically play design, and then lastly the strategic, with our exclusive use of a number we call the power spread, which is derived from our exclusive power rankings. Again, I can already see that the power rankings, widely distributed by virtually every entity now, where 3 or 4 years ago people didn't even talk about power rankings, are inaccurate. And if you just simply want to go back, and I'm especially critical of the media, because this program is designed for twofold purposes. One is to be a media broadcast, and I'm critical of them because they're very untruthful and inaccurate, and they're being paid to do that, which to me is very unrighteous and a great injustice, especially to me and surely God above, who uses math as a language as he equates it and relates it to me. And then secondly, more beneficially, is to those NFL teams or any pro sports team with whom we, calculate information and mine this data, as it were, and to use that in making the most probable and productive basic strategy decisions for their team. Again, very reluctantly, these teams have taken us on this season. I'm unclear as to why. I do know, again, if anybody thinks this has to do with the B or G word, which is sort of Las Vegas based, it is not necessarily the case. It's actually not the case, only because, we just simply want to take that data and use it just from a pure, if you will, perspective on, how these teams can either be more aggressive or conservative, or what calls they should make, or what plays they should run in certain cases. And I know it's been very productive to the tune of at least 10 to 15% minimally in the pros, and then even more so in NCAA. So again, I want to apologize about this program not airing last week. I'm going to go over last week's results. I'm going to go over the standings, and then the prognostications or predictions for this upcoming week and the remainder of the season. And then again, you can do the math, as I said, as it relates to those in Nevada who have an interest in the G and B word. And then lastly, those who have an interest in fantasy, which is really veritably not much different than the G and B word. But again, you use a lot of data. It's a little more refined because you're just looking at the players performance versus, let's say, the entire team. But that really makes a big difference. If your team scores a lot, your player's obviously going to score well, fantasy-wise. But again, as for the media, I'm going to make a couple notes here as we're 5 minutes into the program. As I respect them for having the job that they have. I believe television is a powerful tool, obviously, and I believe there's a great responsibility to telling the truth, on that medium. Especially as it equates to NFL games. And I know I'm kind of sputtering through this here because I'm a little disenchanted having watched this Monday night game, and we last week predicted that it'd be a very low-scoring game and that the Cowboys would win, and that was accurate. Again, nobody even got to hear it through my little podcast here. Which is disappointing. I will say this, and you can go back to the beginning of the season and just look at the blog that you can find at sportsblog.com under my name, Mark Anthony DeBello, or just go to the NFL-ESP.com website and click on Sports Blog. But I predicted that the NFC East winner would win the division with something like a 6-10, maybe a 7-9 record. That's surely again looking true. And when I projected an under game for this Dallas game, the reason I did so is those two teams are the best teams in the division. And as you've seen in these NFC East games, these teams play quote-unquote bad or poor football. I hear the announcers at the end of the game on ESPN especially musing about that. But at least you see with the Redskins in Dallas, they play a low-scoring quote-unquote bad game because defense really is more reflective of a team's overall strength, meaning, again, the stronger teams have better defenses. So when you see a close game like that, these are two bad teams playing each other. They just happen to have equal defenses and equal offenses, and that's why the game is so close to the end. But even so, better teams and defenses than when you see a game like the Giants and Eagles, who play a high-scoring game because they have weak defenses and overall, and then a high-scoring game and a close game because, again, these teams are all equally rated in that NFC East. And as I said, it's the lowest-ranked division in the entire NFL as we projected at the beginning of the season, ahead of the NFC South, which is Carolina's division. And then I want to make a note about Carolina, and that is, and I'm going to give to some credit, one media person who I didn't list on that list, Coach Tony Dungy, who works alongside Rodney Harrison, as I said, is just really poor at his prognostications and predictions. But at least Coach Dungy, who is also very bad now, I realize, at least he admits it. And you can hear him at the end of every show saying, well, I didn't think that Indy would win these games, or I didn't think Pittsburgh was that good. Or, I mean, you can just hear them talk and listen to what they say and follow what they say. But at least Coach Dungy, nobody else does this. I surely try to do it, and I know Coach Dungy is a blessed Christian. Man, that at least he admits where he's inaccurate. So I'm the first to admit it. Although it's seldom the case, I just have to say, because God is very knowledgeable, and the closer you draw to God and ask him about things like, as I do, like football and the media and what's going on in the world, and knowing that he uses math as a language, I'm blessed to be able to be very accurate in my assessments. So anyway, again, at least he does say that. So let me, as we near the 10-minute mark, speaking of last week, and I also had one other note here that I did mention last week that I'll just note again before we near the 10-minute mark, and that is about the announcers giving records for home and away. As I noted last week, again, I'm sorry you didn't hear it, is that home and away, they put too much emphasis on what that is. They don't quite understand what it means. Or player performance, like Kirk Cousins, they said he's great at home, he's bad on the road. Well, already they were wrong tonight because he played at home and they lost. Home field advantage is basically biased referee decisions for the home team. Okay, and as I said, you've seen what people are calling the worst officiating season in history, and part of the reason that is too, it's like the referees are police, okay, are policing the game, and when the NFL puts down a dictate that they want the games to be safer, that typically means more, I'll use an analogy, arrests, okay, or penalties called, more infractions, and that's what you're seeing. And I saw the game on Sunday night, Pittsburgh and Indy, even on both sides. Pittsburgh surely got the better calls, but even Indy got, really calls that were against Pittsburgh that shouldn't have been penalties or fouls. So, again, the refereeing is bad not only because of the safety issue, but because, as we prognosticated and predicted, the home field advantage. Very biased. We live in a very political society. It's very much related. Churches are now the NFL franchises, and people attend stadiums like their churches, and they worship their teams and look to them for moral, guidance or moral sociological and cultural significance and what's going on in the world, and that has a lot to do with officiating, believe it or not. It's very deeply seated, spiritually and psychologically relevant. Nobody else believes that. I can only tell you that I've studied this at least wholeheartedly for 15 years. I've met with Mike Carey at the MIT Sports Analytics Conference, who's an announcer. I've talked to him about this. I've done a study. I've got data to back this up. So I must be telling the truth, because last year, if you listened to the broadcast, you heard me say, watch what's going to happen next year with home field advantage and penalties, and it did. You heard me say home field advantage is 4 to 7 points at home. Watch what happens this week. I haven't been wrong. 90% accurate. Just listen. And if you go back and you look at the standings that I projected that would be at the end of the year, 90% accurate. More so than anybody in the media, period. Not even close. Every season, 15 straight years. So if I speak with some passion and fire in my voice, it's because I'm frustrated, because I admit I want to be heard. I want to preach football. I want God's knowledge to be known. I want my knowledge as a conduit between He and the world for it to be known. I want to help people. I want to tell them the truth. I want to serve. I want to serve a team, an organization, a fan base, an audience, whatever the case. So I'm trying my best. God only knows. But with so few listeners, I probably even shouldn't be recording this show and just maximizing this half hour of my life to do something else. But again, I've taken it to presidents, owners, CEOs, GMs of teams, coaches. I see these guys. I respect them, again, that they're in that profession. I'm friends with them, some of them. I work with them. I'm always trying to use my spiritual gift of encouragement to encourage them and to encourage people. But a prophet's never known in his own hometown, I guess. They just don't get it, and it's really frustrating. And surely, as I said, the media, they're very prejudicial in who they hire, what kind of people, those people's spiritual backgrounds. Certain networks only hire certain religions, others certain races, others certain genders. I'm a middle-aged, if you will, Christian white male. That's the most difficult voice to be heard, okay, or person to hire. And again, sadly, I'm the most accurate and truthful. So let me get into last week and the standings and sort of give a quick recap, and I'm going to go through this quickly. And again, I can only apologize about last week not being on. Green Bay, Detroit, we figured it'd be a close game, and we had called Green Bay, a great ending there for Green Bay and for them to win that game. As far as I can recall, I think both teams from an NFL ESP perspective, I know this season are not, following what the power spread is, or at least the one that we have listed. That's the accurate one. So they're both suffering in their record. And actually, I can't think of any team who's really, using our knowledge to the best or calling, basic strategy games the way they should. San Fran, Chicago, we projected San Fran could upset that game, and they did. They were a 6.5-point power spread underdog, at least Vegas's version of that number. And when you see a number like 6.5 or 2.5, they're enticing you to play the favorite. You'd want to lean toward the underdog. That was the case in that game, and it came to fruition. Bengals, Browns, we knew without Johnny Manziel, the Browns didn't have a chance. They didn't likely have a chance even maybe with him. That the Bengals are actually probably the best team in the AFC. If I look at my defensive numbers, and again, I think they can actually win in the playoffs this year where people don't think that they can. The Jags and Titans, this was actually a 2.5-point game, very close. It didn't come out for the Jags in their favor. I like the Titans in the beginning because people were speaking about them losing at home like 15 straight games, and the words are very powerful, and as soon as somebody says something and it's broadcast on the media, go against it, okay? There is such a thing as quote-unquote jinxing it, okay? And when you put that out there in spoken word, which God spoke the creation into existence, you actually jinx jinx it, if you will. If you don't hear about something and it's humble and quiet and there's humility and it's sort of under, quote unquote, under the radar, then that would likely come so. But as soon as the media says something, you can basically bank it's going to be the opposite. So when they brought that to light, we leaned toward Tennessee, but from a Vegas perspective, it was a 50-50 game, and that's basically how it turned out. We like the Bills over the Texans. As I mentioned last week, which again you didn't hear, we break the season down sort of in a bell curve, like 3 segments: first 5, middle 5, last 5 games, and then the last game, 16th game. We don't really count sometimes because a lot of times it doesn't have any influence in the standings, and the game is virtually meaningless. That's not always the case, but normally what you'll see is a team that starts the season well in the first 5 games will have a lull in the middle 5 and then perform well again in the last 5. And contrarily, a team that starts poorly might peak at the middle of the season and then end up poorly. But again, a lot of it relates to schedule strength and the power ratings, and broadcasters especially and coaches don't realize that. They put too much emphasis on the one-loss record. That's not so much coaches. They look at film more, but the media does, and that's really not reflective of a team's power rating. I'll give you a perfect example. The Panthers are one of the lowest power-rated teams I've ever seen with a perfect record. Okay, they're 12-0 or whatever they are. They are a very low 12-0. They're coming out of the second weakest division in the NFL. They are not as good as people think. They have a very weak schedule, and they're going to that power spread or that other spread that they use in Las Vegas. That spread's going to keep going up, and it's going to be very inflated and very inaccurate. And you're going to get a real opportunity, like we last week, with the Saints to actually beat them straight up. And they probably should have, the Saints. They didn't coach a very good game, and I respect and like Coach Payton, but they kept that power spread game, which was 6.5 or 7 close, which we projected was our best play of the week, in addition to Buffalo and Dallas, and they all came out. But again, Carolina is really overinflated, and we projected that, and this sort of relates to the bell curve thing with Atlanta. So we look at the Atlanta-Tampa game. Atlanta's lost for Vegas investors something like 10 weeks in a row. And I had projected beginning of the year they just beat 4 bad teams easily, and it made them look much better than they are. And Atlanta is, they're not going to make the playoffs, and their one-loss record is, beginning to reflect how poor a team they really are. And they can't even get by Tampa Bay, again, another weak team in their own division in a close game. So anyway, you're going to see that with Carolina. And I mentioned the Carolina Saints game, a close game as we projected. And Carolina, I don't think is as good in the end as Green Bay, Minnesota, or Arizona. Okay, and they'll hit a wall when they reach those teams in the playoffs. And you can forget the NFC East representative; they'll get beat by 40 points in the playoffs. So some of the other games, Ravens, Dolphins. Again, we projected a close game. We lean toward the Dolphins. The Ravens are still trying. I love Coach Trestman, God bless him, and everybody there who I've tried to work with. Although they rejected NFL ESP, they're sowing the consequences. Minnie and Seattle. I have to admit, I thought Minnesota would do better this game. Their strength of schedule is weak. Seattle thumped them. Seattle is one of those teams who's ranked more highly power rated than their record reflects. So I give them great kudos for winning that game. And I have to admit, I might have had Minnesota rated a little too high, but I still think, again, they're a playoff-bound team, and they'll be in the finals. The best 3 teams, there are, will be, well, the 4 best teams surely are Seattle, Minnie, Green Bay, and Arizona. So I don't even know if Carolina's in the top 5 there, to be honest with you. And as good as Carolina, I think they are a good team. I'm just telling you they're overrated. Arizona thumps St. Louis. That's not a surprise. I already mentioned the Tampa-Atlanta game. Giants and Jets, we like the Jets. 2 bad teams. Again, the Jets are doing just about what we projected they would do at the beginning of the year. I actually forwarded it to their organization to let them know. And again, that was a close game. We like Denver, and I heard today, and I mentioned last week something about politically correct Peyton or political Peyton. The worst thing the Broncos could do is put Peyton Manning back in the lineup. Now, I know Peyton Manning. I don't know him personally. I respect him. He's a Hall of Famer, probably the greatest quarterback to ever play the game. But he is on the downside of his career, and it happens to everybody. And they have to come to realize that and not go with the ambiance that comes around him, let's say, the mystique, or his being whiny, let's say, and wanting to play. For the good of the team, he needs to really start supporting Brock Osweiler, and if he becomes a true mentor, that will get Denver into this, either the Super Bowl or the AFC Championship, because the coaching up to Coach Kubiak is a huge coaching upgrade from last year, which we noted when we liked Indy to defeat Denver in the playoffs, and they did, and they were big power spread underdogs. But Osweiler is a definite improvement in the quarterback position on Denver, and has improved them in the power spread rankings, and there's no need to go back to Peyton Manning. And now I know he's going to get off of the injury report, and there's going to be this quote-unquote quarterback controversy, and I don't know how Denver's going to spin it, but, they'll probably just say Peyton's not ready for the rest of the season, and his foot still hurts, even though he is ready, and he'll, but however they do it, I know they do stuff like that. But again, Denver's much improved. Kansas City, we projected at the beginning of the year. This was one team who actually, in their flow chart, if you will, started weak and then has put together a good middle a good middle third, and put together a good last third as well. Oakland improved that game. I think actually, if I looked at my data, Oakland got more yardage and only won because it lost because of turnovers, but Oakland definitely improved. They're not going to improve. I've met with Coach Rio once, Del Rio, I'm sorry. I don't know that he's the best coach, but he is better than the coach last year, Coach Allen, I think it was. But anyway, so we're not surprised by Kansas City. This one, I have to admit, I did not see coming. I have to admit, with God as my witness, I never thought as even though we projected New England to weaken and that you could see they were getting injuries, that they would lose to Philly. I never saw it. Again, I don't think Philly wins more than 5 games. I still don't think so. That was a quote-unquote fluke. Turnovers and special team returns, that was New England's 1 in 16 fluke loss, and Philly's 1 in 16 fluke win. But we did project that Philly would start letting up a lot of points. They have 3 weeks in a row. This is 28. They'll let up a lot of points next week, even against Buffalo. And you'll see that. Pittsburgh and Indy was the last game. Pittsburgh played like a favorite, looked like a favorite, good solid team, playoff team, definitely in the AFC, and you'll see that. And I'll go through the standings here quickly in the wild card races so you know the truth. As I've been projecting it from the beginning of the season, very much 90% again accurate, NFL ESPN, and I still hear the media members still aren't sure who's going to get there, and they can only handicap week to week, if you will, using the word handicap. New England, beginning of the year, 10-2. We thought Buffalo would be in there. I think they're going to end up being the second wild card. I think they'll surpass the Jets in the standings, even though I think the Jets have a weaker schedule. But Buffalo did let me down, I have to admit that. Not surprised New England's back around because they got Brady back off of the Deflategate thing. Broncos and Chiefs in the West, definitely Broncos and Chiefs are the 2 best teams. We projected that, and Chiefs will be the wild card. Cincy and Pittsburgh, that should be your 2 playoff teams. Pittsburgh the wild card. Indy will win that division by a game or 2 against Houston by the time the season's done. Houston is a bad team, and they definitely won't be a wild card team. And as I mentioned, the winner of the NFC East it should be Dallas if Tony Romo didn't go down, but I think it'll be Washington is the best team out of the remaining teams, and again, they can get in at 6-10 as we projected if they get 6 wins. They could be 5-11 for all I know. But anyway, NFC West, Arizona's the best team. Seattle will be the wild card. We thought the Rams would do a little bit better, but again, their quarterback, we knew at the beginning of the year was going to be a problem, and he is and was. Packers and Vikings. Vikings will be the wild card if they don't surprise the Packers and win the division, but that would be a surprise to me. We projected the Packers at the beginning of the year, but I still think the Vikings are a wild card team. And then the Panthers already mentioned that an inflated 12-0. Tampa and Atlanta definitely won't be there. So anyway, having said that, though, very accurate from what we projected at the beginning of the year. Did anyone else project all those that accurately? No, I don't know of anybody. If you can find them, have them, contact me. So let's go to this week in the remaining 6 minutes we have. I'm going to try to cover all the games from an NFL ESP, combined ESP, Nevada, and fantasy football perspective. Arizona's playing Minnesota. When you see 2 good teams, they usually don't score a lot of points, or they have something that's like a correlation. For instance, Arizona's a good offensive team. Minnesota's a better defensive team. If Minnesota plays well, they'll keep the game low scoring. If Arizona plays well, the game will be high scoring. That can be used in fantasy football. Arizona's about a touchdown power spread favorite. I don't know if it's that much. Arizona should get home calls on a Thursday night. So if you're Minnesota on national TV, if you're Minnesota, you got to be really aggressive. I know Minnesota's not as good a team as Arizona. You'll probably see Minnesota play well in the first and third quarters, and Arizona well in the second and fourth. I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota upsets. I do think they'll keep that game closer than that number that they use out of Nevada, their version of the spread that they get from us. Which is designed, like I said, to make money on the public. Ours is designed for a different reason. So that's the assessment there. Again, two good teams here in a definitive, to me, low-scoring game because they've been scoring high 4 games in a row. And the odds of doing anything, like I said, 5 times in a row is 31-1. 4 times is 15-1. And 3 times is 7-1. So knowing that, both these teams have had high-scoring games 4 weeks in a row. So when you have an undergame like that, your basic strategy decisions become more important, more influential, more meaningful. So in this game, Cincy, like I said, gets 7 points at home field. You're definitely, especially Pittsburgh got good calls last week. Watch the refereeing in the Cincinnati game. You're going to see some really egregious home calls for the Bengals, and one can probably decide the game in a low-scoring game. Eagles against the Bills. Eagles are also a 7-point home favorite team. The power spread is much less. Eagles in the playoff contention will get a lot of home calls there. So if you're Buffalo, you're really going to have to overcome them. Coach Ryan doesn't usually. He kicks too many field goals for the most part, but they need to be really aggressive, Buffalo, and I think Buffalo can and should win that game. And those turnovers and special teams plays that the Eagles got last week could reverse and watch Buffalo get them. Atlanta's playing Carolina. Ironically, as I thought New Orleans would beat Carolina last week straight up, I think Atlanta could actually beat Carolina this week straight up. I think they'll keep the game closer than the spread that Nevada is listing. Again, Atlanta's a bad team, but Carolina, everybody can tell you, though, that they're going to be gunning for a perfect season team to try to defeat them. And these last 3 or 4 weeks, some of these bad teams are going to be playing their quote-unquote Super Bowls against the Panthers. But these are really, teams come from weak divisions, even though I know the Panthers are clearly the best. Niners and Browns is a toss-up game. So much going on with Johnny Manziel and the Browns. Actually just connected with them a little bit today on something unrelated. Tragically, it was a rejection. I don't know how else I can help the Browns other than I know I can help them. Same with the Niners for that matter. Redskins and Bears. The Bears are a small power spread favorite. Actually, overall, I'll tell you this about this week in the last 3 minutes we have. This is one of the toughest weeks I've seen this season. I wouldn't be surprised if you see like 9 underdogs win this week. It's just a lot of surprising games. I think you'll see a lot of close games. Lions and Rams. The Rams are home. I actually think the Rams are going to do well this game. They're a power spread favorite, or at least I'm not going to give the whole exact power spread. I use that term though, but the Vegas version of the spread. They have St. Louis favored, and that's not surprising to me, and I think you'll see them do well. San Diego's playing Kansas City. That should be a close game between those West rivals, but Kansas City's definitely the better team. But again, San Diego, that number I think is a little too big, but that, you never know with those two teams. Saints and Bucks, two bad teams. Again, Tampa's overrated. I wouldn't even have a guess there or an estimation there. Colts and Jags, I think you'll see the Colts win, even though the game's in Jacksonville after their loss. The Colts are going to win that division, and they're going to have to just mathematically win some games to do that. Jets, I already spoke about the Jets and Titans. Marcus Mariota, geez, I'm talking about him and Jameis Winston for Rookie of the Year. I thought Marcus Mariota should get it, will get it. I could be wrong. That would be something I'm definitely, I am wrong about. And I'd admit it if I was, and you'll know if I am. But anyway, Pats and Texans. Texans overrated by the media. I can't see the Pats losing 3 in a row. I don't think anybody probably can, even though Houston's at home and they'll probably get some home calls. I would lean toward the Pats. Broncos and Raiders. Raiders have to take aggressive basic strategy decisions. Coach Del Rio doesn't. They'll probably end up losing because of it. Denver is definitely the better team at home, and definitely we know Denver at home is a 7-point favorite. We know that. Packers and Cowboys. Packers are favored. Again, Cowboys, bad NFC East team. I think the Packers are going to perform well in the one-loss record as they did at the beginning of the season, and I can't see Dallas beating them this game. Baltimore at home, although they have been trying, Seattle is coming on. A lot of people are thinking Seattle and catching on to them finally again. So I would invest in Baltimore if I had to, but again, I wouldn't invest in that game, and I don't. I'm not a proponent of investing in games. I'm just, want to use a strategy to win. And on Monday night, anybody who cast, if you will, or decided that the Jets and Dolphins, again, didn't use the NFL ESP because we could have told you neither of those teams would be in the playoff hunt. And anybody who thinks the Giants are a really good team or should win the East, isn't thinking right. Okay, this game shouldn't even be on Monday Night Football. They should have a different game, and we can project the better games. So anyway, I don't want to give an opinion about that game. So, having said that, look, I'm sorry I stumbled and muttered through this. It's been a long 6-day work week, 16 hours a day, but still I'm blessed to be able to speak and have a breath and breathe. So listen, thank you for listening. This has been NFL Moneyball, brought to you by NFL-ESP.com and NFL Extended Strategic Principles. I've been your host, Mark Anthony DeBello. God bless you.